All right, let's say a prayer and we'll get rolling. And could I ask somebody to shut the back door? That's perfect. Yeah. They're practicing for something. Let's pray. Gracious God, let these conversations and presentations continue to be helpful. I continue to be so thankful for Silverdale Lutheran, for this opportunity, for the Lilly Grant, for the people I've met this summer. And so we pray that this time will be helpful and fruitful, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So going back, last week we talked about my trip to, or our trip, Sandy and I and Beck and Katie's trip to England and Dublin, and you had a number of questions about the church in Sheffield that was kind of a combination Baptist Anglican. So I did talk to Kevin Murphy, my friend down in Southern California, who connected me to this congregation. The Baptist Episcopal thing, or I shouldn't say Episcopal, Anglican, Church of England thing, happened purely out of pragmatic needs. One of the congregations needed a space because theirs was in bad shape and needing remodeling and this type of thing. And so they were having two separate services, and they were getting to know each other and got to know each other so much that they decided, you know, why are we worshiping apart from each other? And so it kind of happened pretty organically. It took the Anglican Church 6 months to approve this combination. Guess how long it took the Baptist Church? No, it took 2 years. Yeah, I know, that was totally the shocker, right? So what Kevin said is the Baptist Church is a little different than the Baptist Church here in the States, and there's lots of different kinds of Baptist churches here. And so they were not so, set on the adult baptism, but I guess they had different reasons and struggles with doing it, but eventually both sides approved. And so they have this joint congregation. I mentioned the baptism. I think that was one of the questions. How did this happen? So their senior pastor is Anglican. They have a Baptist pastor and another Anglican pastor that work with the senior pastor. The baptisms, some of the Anglican folks have their infants baptized. The Baptist folks have dedications, and then so they do that differently. Communion is interesting. That was the other question you had. Is they do have communion. They do have it frequently. They didn't have it when I was there. At least this is what I was hearing from Kevin. But the Baptist side folks they just participate, and they use the Anglican liturgy for the Lord's Supper. So I guess if you're a Baptist and you go, well, I really don't believe that Jesus is present bodily in the supper, but I believe other things, and so they're able to join in together. So it was interesting. So I was glad you had some questions about that, because I think we continue to struggle, don't we, especially in the United States, with how to have good fellowship and ecumenical relationships between the infant baptism churches, Catholic, Lutheran, Episcopal, Methodist, Presbyterian, and what's known as the evangelical churches, which are typically Baptist or kind of Reformed, that don't practice infant baptism. That you have to be immersed and you have to be an adult, make a confession of faith. We continue to struggle with how to be in relationship, and here's a church that's figured a way to do that, and I thought that was really refreshing and wonderful. I know that we have people who go to this church who are Baptist and then go to another church, and we have vice versa. We have people who are Lutheran and go to Baptist churches, and so you figure out how to make it work. But anyway, we're still working on that, I suppose, on a wider scale. So anyway, I answered your questions. Hello. All right, and if you had others, we're moving on. Of course, I shared about the papyrus manuscripts I got to see in Dublin. That was a real highlight. Sandy asked me if I said to you that I was really cranky before I discovered that this library was there, and I didn't tell you that, but she said so anyway, I perked right up, okay, so I was having a low moment. All right, let's move into Ethiopia here. This was when I just thought about a sabbatical. Where would the dream with the Lilly Grant, where would I like to go? I knew I wanted to go to Africa. I first thought about Namibia, because the Lutheran Church is like 50% of Christians in Namibia are Lutheran, and like 75% of the population is Christian. And someday I'd like to go there, but then I started thinking about my evangelism goal for my sabbatical, and I thought of the Makani Jesus Church, the Lutheran Church in Ethiopia, which is, you know, it's hard to determine these things, but probably the fastest growing church in the world right now. So I kind of switched gears and said, and I happened to have a connection with Ron Hoyam, former assistant to the bishop of this synod, now pastor, along with his wife, Lori Hoyam, at Port Madison Lutheran in Bainbridge Island. Ron and I are good friends, and he knew of Gementius Buba, assistant to the bishop in the North American Lutheran Church, who's from Ethiopia and goes there often. And so one thing led to another, and I got hooked up with Gementius and was able to go for like 9-10 days to Ethiopia. So I'm going to share lots about it. We'll see how far we go. If we don't get through it all today, we'll go on to next week. And then I can also tell you that the week after, so not next week, because I know some of you are going to jump into that mentor breakfast that's going on that Pastor Jonathan is hosting, because that's probably the most important thing you can do next Sunday, if that's a call that you might have, because they're looking for more mentors for our junior high kids. So we'll finish up with Ethiopia and sabbatical stuff next week, and then the week Sunday after that, I'm going to have I've got a great featured keynote guest speaker who happens to live under my roof, Sandy Gessner-Crabtree, who is, you know, a great educator and expert in that field, is going to tell you and present why being a Lutheran is good for your brain. No, not brainwash. Why it's really good. Why this particular kind of expression of Christianity is really good for your brain. She's really into brain research and all that stuff. So anyway, that'll be 2 weeks from now, and then we'll have other stuff to do. Okay, so if you didn't know, if you didn't pick up already, the way God just laid this sabbatical out, I went to the beginnings of the faith in Jerusalem, got to walk on the ground that Jesus walked, and then I went to the beginnings of the Reformation, and with time in Germany, and now I got to go to where God seems to really be taking the future. So it had this neat flow from start to end, so to speak. So I don't know what kind of tree this is, but I just took this picture outside as we were traveling between Shashamani and Addis Ababa, and I just was amazed at these trees. It was just amazing. I think that the grass growing around, the teff, that's their famous grain, looks kind of like that. I don't know if that is teff, but it kind of looks just really lush and green that way. So we're learning from where the church is thriving. So let's start with food. You know? So this is a typical Ethiopian gathering. There's probably around 7 or 8 of us around the table. Let's see, laser. I think they put the bread there for me. I don't know. I was like, what's that white bread, American bread there? But anyway, but the Ethiopian guys ate it. So this is injera, I think they call it. But it's a roll that looks kind of like a tortilla, but not. It's spongy. And you just take that and you dip it in and you eat it. And so it was a fun way to eat. They were amazed at me because I could eat the spicy stuff. I don't know, Mexican food. I like jalapenos, so it wasn't too bad for me. I loved it. And different dishes, lamb, and in the middle there's like a cottage, not a cottage cheese, but like a cheese. And so delicious food. So they bring out a bowl and wash your hands beforehand because you're eating with your hands in essence. And anyway, I won't go into some other specifics. But anyway, so this is a smaller meal we had. And up here is my ambo. That's just the seltzer water. What do you want to drink? Ambo. I'll have ambo. So this was a lamb dish that was fabulous. Really good. Okay, so coffee is a big deal in Ethiopia, as you probably know if you're a coffee connoisseur. Kind of the birthplace of coffee, really. And so this is a little clip of they don't always serve their coffee this way, but for special gatherings, they have this little ritual, and so you'll see some incense burning. Where's my deal? Let's see. So, and the coffee's good and thick, and really good. A little sugar is all I needed. It's different than I usually need like half a thing of cream, usually from them, but it was really good. So there you go. I just thought I'd get you really hungry before we start. So that's the food part of Ethiopia, just for fun. This is Gemencius Buba. Let me tell you a little bit of his story. We'll talk some more about it perhaps as we go. So Gemencius was born in Ethiopia, actually on the, I think it's on the far, it would be the west side of Ethiopia. And so here's where a little of history with Ethiopia is important. Ethiopia is the only African country never colonized. So I forget which country tried, but they didn't succeed. And Ethiopia, during most of its history, was ruled by a king, a monarchy, king or queen, that supported the Orthodox Church. And the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia goes right back to like the beginnings of Christianity. You know, you've got the Ethiopian eunuch, you know, on the page, I mean, who was baptized and we assume went off back to Ethiopia. You know, you can't trace things quite back that far, but the Ethiopian Orthodox Church goes way, way back. And so, but Gemencius was born in Ethiopia, grew up there, and then for some of you, during the kind of Cold War that we know about between the United States and USSR, during about a 25-year period, a communist Marxist regime had taken over, and they killed the king of Ethiopia, and so there was a takeover, or a change of regime. You know, most people, the way they talk about the government, the current government's museum that I went to estimates that about 1 million people were killed during the communist Marxist time. And they've got the mass graves to prove that. Of course, they also talked about how bad the king was before the communists, who, you know, was not a, you know, so that's all in the eye of the beholder. But when, and I'm not giving you the exact dates, but just when the wall came down in Europe, and when the USSR fell apart with all the Eastern Bloc, or countries that, you know, they had to let go of, and then they got their independence. When that happened, because the communist Marxist regime was basically propped up by the USSR, it was, all the money was coming from them. When that money stopped, then another change happened. And so since then, they've had a democratic government. But as some of the folks that were leading me around the country said, yeah, and they win 100% of the election every election. So democratic. And in fact, as I was having lunch, I think at one of those lunches, I was talking to some guys, and they said, you know, they were very upset at President Obama because he talked about the government as a legitimate democracy. And so the people in general were very upset because, as you can tell in the news, most people are very angry at the government currently. But then President Obama sent Kerry, who met with some of the opposition, and that kind of healed things. But they recognized that the current government, however they don't like them, is keeping ISIS out. And that's probably what the United States is most happy with. So it's like, you keep that out, you know, we're going to look aside, you know, on some other things. But Kerry did come and meet with some of the opposition, and that, I think, made, you know, really kind of help heal some of the hurt about that. But anyway, so when Russia fell apart, or when the USSR fell apart, you know, there was a change and a new government. And so that's been the same government that gets 100% of the election every time until today. So during, however, going back, and I tell you that history, during the communist Marxist time, Gemencius' dad was a very strong lay leader in the Mekane Jesus Church, which that's the name for the Lutheran Church. It means like household or gathering of Jesus. So Mekane Jesus, gathering of Jesus. So it's called the Ethiopian Evangelical Church Mekane Jesus. And so they fled. They were able to flee because he was such an active lay person that most people thought his dad would be killed. And so perhaps with the Lutheran Church and connections, he was able to he and his family came to the United States. So Gementius, obviously learned English well and had a very formative time in his life here. He became a pastor, and then actually took on positions higher up in the Lutheran Church here in the States. And anyway, but he's always obviously held his love for Ethiopia. And when the Marxist regime stopped, new religious freedoms were allowed because the church was very oppressed and persecuted. You'll hear more about that in a minute. So he was able to start reconnecting, I guess you would say, and got very involved in Mekane Yesu's church. I think was very helpful in helping them heal some fractions and some divisions. He didn't say this, is what I've heard from other people. And so his connection to the church there was very strong. And so now, Gementius has from his basement in his house, he does all these Bible studies and sermons that are sent and then broadcast in Ethiopia and all of northern Africa. Well, he's become a tremendously popular. In fact, when I walked around Addis with him, Addis Ababa, it's kind of like Oprah. I mean, people would come up. Millions of people live in this, and people would come up and, want to talk to him and just ask for a blessing. They asked a blessing from me because I was with him. So, there was one beautiful family with little kids at the hotel we were at, and they said, "Oh, you're with Dr. Gementius, and would you please pray for my children?" And so that was like, wow, that was really cool. So interesting. I'll show you more now about some of his ministries there. So over the last 5 years, Gementius has started a school, college, and this is the guard in front of the college. And when he saw us, he was just beaming, and he had his station, and that was to be the gatekeeper for the college. And I just had to get a picture with him and his little baton, and I thought to myself, if we could all come at whatever station in life we have with that kind of joy. That really hit me, when I thought about him. So I had to get a picture with him, and he was, in fact, there's very little parking in this little area where you go into the school, and a couple times he didn't recognize us, and he was like, "No, you can't come in here." And then he saw us and said, "Oh, yes." All right, so this is Gementius just outside the school talking to some folks. Again, people come up to him all the time. He is like the owner of the school or the director of the school. He's not there. He's only there in the country. He goes there like 5 to 6 times a year, which is a lot. But he has people doing all these ministries. So he has a college that has a theology side and a secular side, like business, and then master's degrees in business and stuff for economy and whatnot. Part of the offering you gave is going to the religious side of that college to help women, in particular because they have satellite schools out in the countryside with education. So part of your offering is going to that. This is just a picture from outside the college. It's up in a building. I just looked out. This is pretty typical of the way folks live in Addis. You notice that. What do you see here? I've got a couple other pictures. This is the way people are tuned in. So it is the medium, and why Gementius has been so successful. And now he's started, in addition to the college, a TV station, which you'll see in a minute. There are these satellite dishes everywhere. This is an apartment. I took it going in the car just because I wanted to show you. So he's got this college which is going. So I got to spend a lot of time with the faculty and listening to them and their stories. This is the building of his TV station, and he's addressing some of the employees and workers. They were training. They had just opened while I was there. They were dedicating it, and training people to produce shows and all kinds of things, which again, religious and secular, just kind of health education stuff. So it's pretty exciting. So I spent my first time there at the college and at the TV station, getting to know people, talking. Anybody that could speak English, one of the first things I did is I sat down with some of the students from the TV station, and there were Muslim students and Christian students and Orthodox students and Protestant students and lots of folks, and some of them knew fairly decent English, and so I asked them questions, and one of the things I remember from that conversation, I said, well, how many people just don't believe in God, period? I know you've got all these different expressions of Christianity, you've got Islam present, you've probably got some of the other Eastern religions I didn't know, and there are small Catholic presence as well. And their guesstimate was that maybe 5% believe in nothing. So pretty much everybody there has some sense of a higher power, I guess you can say, which was interesting. So, all right, so after I spent some great time there, we headed out to Hawassa, which is a fairly large town, and there's Lake Hawassa is the hotel where we stayed at, and in Shashamani is where Gemencius also has started an elementary school. So we got college, TV station, and elementary school. I thought I had a crazy life. No. So this elementary school, we're headed out, we're having lunch, and so on our way to Shashamani, I don't know why I put that one there. Let's see, I wanted to go this. So on our way, we picked up this pastor, who's a Lutheran pastor, and this is his spouse. And he's kind of a famous pastor. He's been involved in lots of, I guess you could say, outpourings of the Spirit, revivals, and he's almost a celebrity as well. We picked him up in Addis and took him out to the countryside with us. He was getting a ride back with somebody else. When we picked him up, which it took us about 45 minutes to find him because there are no street signs, no stop signs, nothing. You just have to pull over and ask someone. So it took us quite a while to find him, but we got him in, and the people from the whole neighborhood came out to say goodbye to him and hug him and be blessed. And it was just this reverence that was amazing. So he gets in the car with us, and he starts in Oromo. He starts to, just prophesy. And I asked Gemencius later, I said, what was he saying? He was giving a prophecy about you, about me, that God's going to do this and that. And I was like, okay, I'll take it. He's got sons that live in the United States. So it was wonderful just to listen to him. He shared with me his perspective on some of the turmoil that if some of you read about what's going on right now. So in Ethiopia, you have like 16 to 18 different ethnic groups. The group that's in charge is a smaller tribe, and I'm forgetting their name. But the larger tribes or ethnic groups are the Oromos and the Hamara. And there's the Hamaric language and the Oromo language. And the official language would probably be Hamaric. But that's neither one way as far as for you guys. But basically, the government is saying they want to improve the lives of people, especially in Addis Ababa, so they're taking over land outside of Addis, building big, huge condominiums that should have better medical service and stuff, because Addis is, it's pretty bad there. I mean, so you can see that, but they just happened, but the Oromo people think it's a land grab, because they're taking the land from the farmers and the people that have lived there forever. So they say, this is what you say, and so they really have not had a voice. And so, when you don't have a voice, and you don't have a vote that matters, it means something, what do you have? You have people protesting, and now, I mean, there's been hundreds of people killed. I did not see any of those protests. My folks that, Gemencius and the folks that, were hosting me, and they were very wise and knew where to go and where not to go and whatnot. But all of them wanted to talk about their government and what was going on. And I didn't talk to one person. Of course, I had a small slice of, that was really happy with where things are at. And then I thought to myself, well, same way where I'm coming from. But hey, to have a vote that means something is pretty amazing. So this pastor shared with me, he's a Romo, but let me just tell you a little bit about the Christian landscape through him. All of the Protestant churches, Lutheran, Baptist, Pentecostal, what's the other one? I forget the name of it, but they are all charismatic. They are all speaking in tongues, prophesying. Well, I'll show you some pictures of worship here in a minute. You're lucky I haven't come back like, come on, let's up those hands, people, come on. You got the amens. You're doing pretty good on those. We're doing good on that. But so all the church, that's a part maybe of the Ethiopian culture and their background. But that's, so you've got the Protestant church, and you can go to a Mekane Yesus service and a Pentecostal service, and the Mekane Yesus service, they do the creed, they read the gospel, but as far as the expression and the feel, it's sealed just like any other Protestant church. There's not a ton of difference. And I worshipped in like 3 different kinds of churches. So that was kind of interesting and fun. So that's this pastor. Let me back up here. So we headed off to Shashamane. I put this on here because this is the pickup truck of outside of Ethiopia. In fact, we had dinner. There's a guy that's very supportive of Gemencius's elementary school in Shashamane who came up with the design for this cart. And he's actually fairly wealthy and produced them because the burro and the cart, and then the young kids, little like 8-year-olds are, on these carts, driving, and this is the way they go. Somebody asked me if that was gasoline or water, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if it was gasoline, but hopefully it's just water. So I decided to put a little picture of driving to, oh, shoot. The audio isn't important, I just wanted you to experience a little of driving through the countryside. Those little blue taxis are everywhere. That's a huge, you see the carts on the left and the right, and we're going to pass now. This, actually, I didn't get a really good one. This was like a breeze compared to most of the time, especially driving in Addis. There's a pastor there visiting with me for a few days, and he's planning perhaps, well, I can't say that yet. But anyway, he said his experience of driving in Addis is it's a communal event. Because there is no lanes and there's no stop lights or stop signs. You have to communicate with everybody, and it's crazy. All right, so here's another one. This one's a little better, I think. Here we go. So we're more now in, I think this is, I forget the name of the town, but this is more of what it looks like driving out towards the countryside. I didn't take too many pictures. Yeah. Hello! No problem. Well, you see those big trucks, although I don't think I got any of the red ones, but China's very involved in Ethiopia now. They buy a lot of stuff from China. China's really pouring a lot of interest there. So we get to Shashamane, and this is in the middle there is some Muslim leaders from Shashamane who wanted to know, this gentleman, who wanted to know, and this gentleman, wanted to know if the school would try and convert their Muslim children to Christianity before they would send them there. And Gemencius was really good to share that, no, that's not our goal. Most of the faculty, however, is Christian. This whole church separation, church and state, is a completely different world there. The government is trying to force more of a separation, but these things that have become so much a part of our world are not really a part of their world. But the school is working on math and reading and general education. So, but again, all the leaders are very passionate Christian people, and I think they see this as part of their Christian life, and I know they can talk about their faith, but the Muslim leaders were like, is this going to be okay? Because they all want to go there. The school is called Lead Star Academy, and it's a fantastic school. And so what I got to do there is I got to speak to, this is a group of parents before school starts. And so Gemeentes had me speak. I put pictures of my daughters up there, and Sandy and I's daughters, and we talked about what they're doing, and they wanted good practices on being a parent and helping your kid with education. So of course I'm an expert on that, right? So I got to share some things, and there's a guy translating for me, and that was cool. And people were very receptive and interested. And then the day before, Sandy was not able to go with for a couple of reasons, but she was going to talk to the teachers, so she told me what to tell them. Or she gave me a bunch of really good stuff to share with them. So I got to do some help for the school in that regard. And so that's just some more. Then Gemeentes is speaking. This is one of the principal of the school. And so he was a great guy. I really enjoyed him. Okay, I'm going to keep going here for a minute, and then I'll try and stop and let you ask some questions, or if there's something I missed. So this gentleman, and I'm forgetting his name right offhand, he met us at Owasso, and he is the synod president, the president of one of the synods. So think ELCA, think bishop. And we've got all these synods. Well, he's the president of one of the synods, and he was talking to me about how fast the church is growing, how they don't have enough pastors. Most of the churches are led by lay people who are excited and passionate about their faith. When I look out at you, I guess I somehow want to communicate to you, in America, and I grew up here and I'm a pastor, but this postmodern world we live in, well, maybe the church is true, maybe it's not, and you've got your truth, I've got my truth, and that makes sense to me to some degree, but that is not the world of Ethiopia. These Christians are not killing Muslims, and the Muslims are not killing them, but they believe that they have the truth, and that it's life and death, what you believe. And let me tell you, we have if I didn't know it before, just what Pastor Jonathan said in the sermon this morning, when we have it good economically, I think sometimes for us God is, well, I don't want to say it's a luxury, or God's a luxury, but what am I trying to say here? It's hard to communicate it. I want to say that sometimes the church thrives in persecution and struggle. And when you have it good, sometimes that's where we struggle. So I don't want to just put it on individuals. I just want to talk about it as a community. This guy was so passionate and so intelligent. I said, well, why is the church growing here? And he said, we believe in Jesus. And we believe people need to be connected to Jesus. And that's our passion. That's what we want to do, because we believe. Because they've experienced a relationship to Christ. Not only brings you an assurance of life after death and all of that, but even more so, a relationship with Christ brings hope and healing and strength to endure. And boy, do these people need strength to endure. Jesus, I guess the only way I can say it is Jesus is real. He's real to all of you too, and he's real to me. But there's a way that I don't know how I can convey it to you. So he was sharing with me how they need more pastors, how the church is growing so fast they can't even keep up with it. I'll talk to you some more about that. But so I got to have breakfast with him, and he was a delight and really interesting. So let's do a little worship samples, and then I'll stop and let you ask some questions, and then we'll keep going. So in Shashamani, Gemeentes was invited to come and speak briefly at this little Pentecostal church. And this gentleman, he and his wife run this church. They have a school. They are doing amazing things to help people. But this is their worship on Sunday. a little snippet. And I'm over here to the right, and I'm trying. I was out of shape to worship in this church. You know, so here's another one. This is shorter but fun. It was awesome. So then Gemencius got up and spoke, and we laid hands on the pastors as a kind of blessing for them. So that was the Pentecostal church. So this is the Makana Jesus Lutheran Church, a little bit of their worship before. So we went from there to here, which I discovered, I think we were like 45 minutes late. You know, Gemencius kept getting a phone call like, where are you? Where are you? Well, we went to the Pentecostal church first, you know. So Africa time is different than the United States time. So, all right, let's see here. Just a short clip. All right, so that's fun. It was so filled with the Spirit and so exciting. But you notice an altar here, right? And a pulpit. And when I spoke with some of the leaders, let me say this about Makana Jesus. Within the Lutheran world community, like the Lutheran World Federation, I talked about that when I was in Germany. Some people like, are they really Lutheran? Because they're kind of Pentecostally. When I talked to them about doctrine, said they are as Lutheran as you can get. And they do baptize infants, and that's the difference between them and other Protestant churches, or some other Protestant churches. When I talked to a person you'll see in a little bit, I mean, it's like, wow, I mean, he is solid as can be. So I didn't have that, and I think it's kind of a shame that sometimes they're thought of a little bit suspiciously that way. So you want to hear my little greeting to the, we'll see if we can make this work here. Sign in to Google. All right, here we go. So this is I got a chance to greet them.
What a joy to be with you.
They're like, come on, we want to say amen, Pastor, come on.
Jerusalem, where is it?
that's where they cut it off. But I gave your greetings to the Makana Jesus Church in Shashamani. So that was cool. So give yourself a hand. You got it. Okay, so, stop that. And let's drop that. So, anyway, so there's the greeting. I'll show you. I think time-wise, I'm not going to show. Did you notice the Oromo language? It's just beautiful. I just love to listen to Gemetis and the way. I mean, and just when you hear him, this is a spot where he's preaching and they're singing a song. I'll skip that. But then, so I got to spend some time with the kids after the service. I didn't want to go, but Gemetis group had to take off right away. So that was a delight. There were tons of kids in this church. They brought the kids up. They did a blessing. This is something that we're adding to the children's sermon here. They did not have a pastor currently. The pastor just had to leave to go somewhere else, and so this is one of the lay leaders that I'm hugging there. The gentleman on the left, I'm going to try and have you listen to something after we stop for some questions. But they're very huggy in Ethiopia. I love it. The guys, you're just hugging all the time. And I like that. Although they're even a little bit too much. So we were walking down the street and Bisrat. I was walking with Bisrat and he grabbed my hand, I think he partly wanted to make sure he was keeping track of me because we were walking down the street in Addis and we're holding hands, And, I thought, this is cool, for the first 20 yards or so, but no, we're still holding hands. We're still going, but that's just normal, so that was a fun cultural thing. But very huggy, very, so learning from the culture there was really cool too. So let me stop there with what you've heard. Let me give you one more thing, and then the question. So I think some of you read in my Instagram and whatnot, and Facebook. So currently, they just finished a 3-week campaign, probably a month ago. Their goal was for 5,000 congregations to preach the gospel to 5 million people with 1 million converts. That was their goal in 3 weeks. On the website, it said that they were about 5-point-something million. That when I talked to the president, when I saw him in the president, like the bishop of the whole church type of thing, in Germany, in Wittenberg, when I ran into him there with the Lutheran World Federation, he said that they're about 7.2 million now. When I talked to the head guy of their national campaign, he said it's really like 8.2 million. So in the United States, there are somewhere around 5 million Lutherans when you combine all the different Lutheran expressions. So just Ethiopia, there's that many Lutherans. So pretty exciting stuff. Let me stop there. Questions, comments, like, well, what about this? What about that? We've got one right here, Ken, in the front. Yep. So, and then we'll see how far this goes, and we can do more next week if we need to. Yep.
You mentioned that there are a lot of different ethnic groups.
Yes.
I'm assuming they have different languages. Do they all have Bibles in their languages?
Nice question. Yes, I think that most of them, Amharic and Oromo certainly do. In fact, that gives me a little cue to tell you a story. So the answer is yes to that. I asked some of them, well, do you guys know? I can't really tell between Oromo and Amharic. And do you know? I said, oh, yeah. It's the way you speak. It's maybe your accent. Most people speak Amharic because that's the main language, but then you have all these other languages. But mostly what I heard was Oromo and Amharic. Those are the larger ethnic groups. But they do have Bibles. Here's what I was told about how the Lutheran Church kind of got started in Ethiopia. Swedish missionaries, well, there are missionaries from lots of different Europe countries, but that had influence in different parts of Ethiopia. But this is the way the story goes, is that a Swedish missionary was in Ethiopia, purchased a slave that had been a slave for many times within Ethiopia, and then set him free. And this is slavery within Ethiopia, not like outside. But, so this person was a slave, freed him, sent him back to Sweden. He got an education, and he learned the faith, became a Christian, and he said, I want to go back, and he was an Oromo. And so he came back to Ethiopia, right around, like early 1900s, I believe, is about the right timing. But the Orthodox Church did not want these Protestant missionaries. And so they were very powerful. They were basically the religion of the state. That's the way I'd say it. And so they were keeping everybody out. They didn't want this Protestant kind of Christianity coming to Ethiopia. So this gentleman I'm talking about, he had changed his name to Onesimus, which, you know, that Onesimus is the slave in Philemon that Paul sends back. So he changed his name to Onesimus, and I think it's Nesib is his name, but he's a pretty famous guy now. And he came back to Ethiopia, and the Orthodox Church wouldn't let him go back to his homeland, and they made him stay on the far eastern part of Ethiopia, which is basically where Somalia is now, or right in that area. And he couldn't come, and so he couldn't come. He was so frustrated because he wanted to come back and share the gospel with his Oromo people. So what he decided to do is translate the Bible into Oromo. And so he did. And the Bible came to the Oromo people in a way that they hadn't had it, because it was mainly in Amharic or whatever the national language was. And so that's really part of the way the church got going among the Oromo people. So there you go. So yes, the Bible is translated in most of their languages that I'm aware of. There was another slave girl with a German missionary who was purchased and freed, went to Germany, and told her people in Germany so much about Ethiopia and her people that the Germans sent missionaries and help and aid to her people. She never made it back. She got ill and died in Germany. But see, there's lots of stories like this that are pretty exciting. Okay, other comments? Barb, over here.
So, to be Lutheran in Ethiopia means that you're Oromo only?
No. They are, thank you, that's a great question. No, they transcend all the different ethnic groups. Yep. And that's, however, there has been tension around that. I think that's partly what Dementius was helpful bringing, but I don't know that for sure. So, but no, they're working all through, and the trainings that they do, like with this missionary, this 551 as they call it, 5 million people and with 1 million converts, they are training people to go out to every aspect of Ethiopia. And I should also say Mekane Jesus now has missionaries in South Africa and all over Africa that they're sending people. So yeah, great question. Thanks for that. Other questions, comments at this point? Yeah, please.
My understanding is that the ELCA and the Mekane Jesus have split
Yes.
alliances. When did that happen and why?
Yeah, excellent, correct question, Lisa. I didn't mean to not bring that up. So, in 2009, when the ELCA passed the resolutions that you can recognize same-gender unions and you can be served by a pastor in a same-gender union, part of the challenge of that decision ecumenically was that Africa is in a whole different place with that issue than we are here. And that decision has strained all of our relationships with all the African churches. However, the Mekane Jesus Church was so troubled by it that they voted to fracture official relationship, which for them meant a lot of money. The ELCA was very supportive, and so that was a very hurtful and sad, but I guess partly understandable decision on their part. And I didn't go there because I wanted to go because of my evangelism interest, and I did speak to one of the church officials, and he was like, so what does your church do? And, you know, we had a conversation. I talked about compassion for people who are gay, but yet, you know, we're struggling with that, and he was the most loving, great guy, but just couldn't get his brain around that. So they're in a whole different world there. So Lisa, thank you so much for asking that question. So, but I can say the ELCA and the Makani Jesus Church are still trying to have conversation. But yeah, there isn't an official, full communion relationship.
So my understanding is in Ethiopia, they imprison people who are homosexuals. Is that true? And what is the church's involvement in that?
Right. That is a great question. I did not, I don't know that they do that or not. It's certainly possible. It's something that goes on a lot in Africa and South America. Oh, I don't know about South America, but they are in a different world with that, and I do not know. And that would have been a good question for me to ask about, well, what do you do for people who, are gay or, But again, part of what they can't get around the concept of orientation. They just, they feel it's a decision and a behavior, and so I hope that we can continue to have conversation there. There are other African Lutheran churches that are in the same place, but they did not go so far to officially fracture a relationship. But I can tell you that there still is conversation, and I'm really happy about that. But Lisa, that's a great question. I need to ask. I will actually ask Gamenchus when I talk to him next about that. Let me say this, that on the flip side, which is interesting, when I was in Wittenberg, I happened to run into the head of the ecumenical part of the ELCA, and when he was actually talking to me about Makani Jesus, and I said, I'm going to be going there this summer, and so we talked about it, and later he came up to me and says, Bill, you really shouldn't be going, because we're not in full agreement with them anymore. And I said, well, maybe it's better to still be in conversation with them, and maybe we can learn something from them about some things, and they can, so that was interesting. I didn't even think about that side of it, truthfully, but that tension is there, and so Lisa, I appreciate you bringing that up. And absolutely, right here.
Yeah. What percentage do you think speak English, and do they teach it in their college and schools?
So, not so much in the public schools. A lot of the private schools, they're teaching English. A sampling would be the faculty that I was helping at the school in Shashamani. Most of them understood my English without a need of a translator. So the Lead Star College, they're trying to really build up, the English as part of the instruction, because that's kind of the international business language. So it's coming, but it's not nearly like it is in some of the countries that were colonized by Great Britain, who speak English as a primary language still. So, and that's something I had not thought about. Yeah. Good. Or questions? Good questions. Good questions. Interesting, huh? Let me, let's see, what do we got? We got 5 minutes. Let's do this, and then we'll finish up a little bit next week, and we'll do a little work on evangelism outreach. But this is, so I'm taking a picture out the car, and this gentleman here on the far left is speaking, and he's telling a little bit of his story. Because the other thing I want to talk about next week is Christian-Muslim relationships, and how we do that, and how that's done in Ethiopia. So I want to see if you can hear, he's talking, and then Gamenchus is translating what he says, and let's see if we can hear it. Oh, nuts. I keep pressing the forward button instead of the volume button. Yep, next week we'll talk about the Gudina Tumsa Foundation. We'll talk next week too about church state, how you be a Christian in the world, ministering to the whole person. So we'll work on that next week. Okay, let's try this again. So he's talking. Okay, I'll stop it there. If you couldn't hear it, I thought it would be a little louder. This gentleman, his name's Muhammad. He was a Muslim and became a Christian. He didn't change his name, however. In fact, his main ministry is with Muslims. But because his name's Muhammad, even the church and the Christians spread rumors about that he was with Al-Qaeda or something like that. So that tension and those misconceptions are there. And so he kind of was persecuted because he was a Muslim by Christians. And of course the Muslims think he's completely out. And so he's sacrificing all of that to follow Jesus. And he was fascinating to talk to. But that's just by way of whetting your appetite maybe for next week. We'll talk about this Gudina Tumsa Foundation. Gudina was the president of the Makane Jesus Church for a term during the communist Marxist regime and was killed and martyred in prison. And so I want to talk about how he walked this, how do I be a Christian and care about people's salvation, and how do I also be involved socially with the government, in his situation. So we'll talk about that by hearing his story. We'll talk a little bit about the Muslim-Christian relationships. How do we do this? How does it work in Ethiopia? And then we will hear a little bit from the one Makane Jesus person, and I think that will be a really fruitful time for us. And then, like I say, Sandy will be on the week after that. So, hey, thank you for your great questions. Thank you for listening again. Thank you for your support for this amazing trip that really has really changed me in some great ways. So, God bless. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.